Welcome to Compelling Topics, the only channel dedicated to the perspective of leading researchers from the Italian independent scene. Let's turn your minds on. A sharp and unsettling dive into one of the most prophetic political satires of modern cinema. This analysis explores how Wag the Dog goes far beyond dark comedy to reveal the mechanics of media manipulation and manufactured reality. Through the insights of Enrica Perucchietti and Roberto Quaglia, the film emerges not just as a story about deception, but as a blueprint for understanding how narratives are constructed, controlled, and ultimately believed. Enrica Perucchietti and Roberto Quaglia analyze Wag the Dog, directed by Barry Levinson in 1997. The film is based on Larry Bainhart's novel American Hero and features a top-tier cast: Dustin Hoffman, Robert De Niro, Anne Heche, Dennis Leary, Willie Nelson, and Andrea Martin. The score is composed by Mark Knopfler. The original title becomes the focus of an initial, in-depth reflection. The English expression, wag the dog, literally the tail wagging the dog, dates back to the 19th century and is used to describe a situation in which a secondary or seemingly irrelevant element gains disproportionate importance, to the point of becoming the dominant force in the narrative. Perucchietti points out that the Italian title Sex and Power is, in both commentators' view, the most trivializing possible translation of a title that is in fact rich in meaning and structurally essential to understanding the film. Quaglia adds that the original title actually encapsulates the entire paradigm of contemporary information, and that abandoning it helped obscure the film's true significance in Italy. The story takes place just days before a U.S. presidential election. A sexual scandal erupts at the White House. A teenage Girl Scout accuses the president of misconduct. To manage the crisis, Conrad Breen, a skilled spin doctor played by Robert De Niro, is brought in, working alongside Winifred Ames, a presidential aide portrayed by Anne Heche. Breen and Ames devise a plan to divert public and media attention away from the scandal. They spread the false story of an Albanian terrorist cell threatening U.S. territory from a base in Canada. The idea is not to fight a real war, but to simulate one against Albania. To stage this fabrication, they enlist Hollywood producer Stanley Motz, played by Dustin Hoffman, along with a small creative team. The ruse works. The fake war dominates the news cycle, and the sexual scandal fades into the background. Quaglia emphasizes that one of the film's most valuable aspects is the wealth of insight it provides into the real techniques of spin doctors and social engineering. In particular, he highlights a key scene in which De Niro's character, speaking with Hoffman's, explains that the Warren Commission served to cover up the true masterminds and executors of Kennedy's assassination. He then clarifies that war is first and foremost a spectacle, carefully orchestrated, and that pseudo-events are constructed to legitimize crises and redirect public attention. Both commentators consider the film extraordinarily rich in analytical material. Each viewing reveals details that previously went unnoticed. Perucchietti calls it a masterpiece she has watched multiple times, continuing to draw new reflections from it. One of the most emblematic sequences involves the construction of war imagery. Motz and his team shoot studio scenes set in Albania that are entirely fabricated. Among the performers is a very young Kirsten Dunst, playing a girl fleeing from bombings. Since a cat required for the scene is unavailable, she holds a bag of chips, which is digitally transformed into a kitten in post-production. The sequence explicitly echoes the techniques used to falsify wartime information. Quaglia also draws attention to one of the film's most direct real-world references, the Gulf War. According to him, an anonymous American spin doctor revealed that everything the public saw during that conflict had been pre-written like a screenplay. The general's briefings, including those by General Schwarzkopf, were scripted before hostilities even began, bearing no relation to what was actually happening on the ground. The narrative presented was the one that needed to be told, not a representation of reality. In this context, Quaglia cites the Kuwaiti incubator story. During the Gulf War, the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United Nations testified that she had witnessed Iraqi soldiers removing babies from incubators and leaving them to die on the floor. The testimony later proved entirely false, and it was discovered that the speech had been written by a vice president of a major public relations firm working for the White House and the Pentagon at the time, in order to justify military intervention. Similar examples are noted in the case of soldier Jessica Lynch, whose media-crafted story of heroism during the Iraq War is compared to the fictional soldier depicted in the film. Perucchietti also recalls the so-called Syrian videos, footage purportedly documenting conditions in Syria that was later revealed to have been shot in Egypt and even staged by Scandinavian troops. The dynamic is exactly the one portrayed in the film, the studio construction of a reality later presented as authentic. One of the most important theoretical nodes Quaglia identifies in the film concerns the relationship between television and reality. In a key scene, De Niro's character is stopped by a CIA agent, who informs him that the war does not exist. De Niro replies that the war certainly does exist, because he saw it on television. Quaglia observes that this exchange, while seemingly comedic, is philosophically dense and echoes Jean Baudrillard's reflections on simulation. Television has killed reality, and those who manipulate information are fully aware of this, building their strategies upon it. On this point, both commentators dwell at length. The line is linked to a famous statement attributed to Karl Rove, advisor to George W. Bush, who reportedly told a journalist after September 11, 2001, "You're part of the reality-based community. We're an empire now, and when we act, we create our own reality. And while you're studying that reality, we'll act again, creating other new realities." In Quaglia's view, this confirms that Levinson's film was not an exercise in political fiction, but a faithful trailer of a world that was already emerging. In the second part of the film, when the fabricated Albanian war has to be abandoned due to CIA intervention, the protagonists invent a new narrative device to boost the president's standing in the polls: the figure of a missing war hero in Albania, nicknamed Old Shoe, played by Woody Harrelson. The construction of this character follows the classic template of the media hero. He is said to have been wounded and lost in action. Public concern is carefully fueled, and symbolic gestures of solidarity are orchestrated. American citizens begin throwing shoes onto power lines as a sign of support. The character must then be physically presented to the public before the election, but it emerges that he is in fact a man who had been serving a long sentence for the rape of a nun and is psychologically unstable. Historians badly. Quaglia observes that, however grotesque and exaggerated this sequence may seem, it is not so far removed from reality. Perucchietti cites the case of soldier Jessica Lynch. Turned into a heroine by the media machine, Lynch later refused to endorse the official version of her story in an interview. From that moment on, she became the target of a smear campaign involving sexually charged allegations. Perucchietti describes this mechanism as the system's revenge against those who refuse to play the role assigned to them. She adds that she is personally aware of other similar cases, which remain unspoken for obvious reasons. According to both commentators, the same pattern can be seen in the case of a Ukrainian woman filmed fleeing while pregnant during Russian bombardments, a story that went viral, only to be later dismantled by photojournalist Giorgio Bianchi, who interviewed the woman directly and obtained a completely different account. In that case as well, a wave of defamation followed shortly after her denial. A crucial point raised by the commentators concerns the relationship between the film and the very power structures it appears to criticize. Perucchietti poses a key question. If the film is so explicit in exposing techniques of information manipulation, who allowed it to be made, and why? The answer that emerges is that the film is not merely an act of denunciation, but rather a product created with full awareness of those same techniques. Quaglia notes that in the very years Wag the Dog was released, 1997, other major films were produced, such as The Truman Show, 1998, and The Matrix, 1999. All were presented as works of critique. Yet, in his view, they also served to prepare the collective imagination for the total virtualization of reality that would take shape after September 11, 2001. The structural relationship between Hollywood and the Pentagon is made explicit. Many storylines are still today suggested or directly provided by military consultants, and the 1997 film fits within this broader framework. Perucchietti adds that the unfortunate Italian title, Sex and Power, unintentionally reduced the film's critical reception in Italy, as it obscured its true subject in the eyes of the general public. Just a few months after the film's release in American theaters, the United States faced a crisis strikingly similar to the one depicted: the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal, the extramarital affair between President Bill Clinton and in turn Monica Lewinsky, which exploded as Sexgate. In the weeks following the scandal, terrorist attacks struck U.S. embassies in Africa, prompting an immediate military response. Bombings followed in Sudan and Afghanistan, and later in Serbia. Quaglia describes this sequence of events as prophetic, in a sense that goes beyond mere coincidence. The film, written and released before the scandal broke, seemed to anticipate not only the general political dynamic, but the specific pattern of events: a sexual scandal at the White House managed through a military action designed to divert public attention. In his view, when such coincidences become systematic, the very notion of coincidence begins to lose credibility. Other similar examples are mentioned. The film Pearl Harbor, released in U.S. theaters 4 months before the September 11, 2001 attacks, and a film about anthrax that was ready for production just as the first anthrax-laced letters appeared, an unprecedented event in history. Quaglia notes that in some cases the time gap between fiction and reality is only a few months, and that no honest producer could have predicted such events. The alternatives, as he frames them, are twofold. Either these are coincidences, or they are the result of a deliberate and sophisticated psychological operation by those who had prior knowledge. The film also reveals a subtle, yet significant element: internal conflicts among the various centers of power that shape mediated reality. When the CIA steps in to stop the fake Albanian war, De Niro's character persuades the agency to stand down with a simple, yet devastating argument: the CIA itself exists thanks to the existence of crises. If real problems are lacking, they must be simulated. The CIA agent immediately relents. The character of producer Motz, played by Dustin Hoffman, introduces another dimension, that of creative narcissism. Motz is driven not by political conviction, but by artistic instinct. When the war is halted by the CIA, he delivers one of the film's most iconic lines: "The war isn't over until I say it's over. This is my movie, not the CIA's." Quaglia comments that this line sheds light on the often conflictual relationships among those who produce artificial realities at the highest levels, drawing a parallel with the case of Donald Trump, who announced a withdrawal of troops from Syria only to be pressured by elements within the so-called deep state into reframing that withdrawal as a temporary repositioning in Iraq, before returning to Syria shortly afterward. The production of reality, in other words, is never monolithic. It is a field of competing actors and interests. One of the most refined and paradoxical aspects that Quaglia identifies in the film concerns the preemptive control of critical narratives. The film exposes manipulation techniques so explicitly, and at the same time cloaks them in a grotesque, almost cartoonish aura, that it becomes difficult for the viewer to believe that the real world actually operates in this way. This cartoonization serves a purpose. Hoffman's character is an overt narcissist. The plan is absurd in its details, and the characters themselves verge on caricature. This layer of unreality shields the real system from being truly recognized by the audience. As Quaglia puts it, you can show this film to hundreds of people, but you will never convince them that the real world actually works like this. Because this is a film, and the real world is the real world. In reality, he adds, the real world is worse than what the film portrays, but the film places a limit on our ability to imagine that. There is also another subtle mechanism at work, forcing anyone who seeks to describe the dynamics of media manipulation to rely on Hollywood allegories as reference points. When people try to explain how propaganda works, they say it's like Wag the Dog, or it's like The Matrix. At that moment, Quaglia observes, the speaker unintentionally shifts away from discussing reality and back into discussing a film. In this way, the system appropriates even the language of its critics, pulling it back into its own narrative. In his view, this is one of the most diabolical aspects of the entire operation. The film also anticipated another practice that would become widespread in the years to follow: the studio production of videos attributed to terrorist organizations. The footage created by producer Motz in Wag the Dog, according to Perucchietti, closely resembles a series of video messages attributed to Al-Qaeda and later ISIS, materials that Western audiences would grow accustomed to in the 2000s, and which were later discovered not to originate from remote Middle Eastern bases, but from locations much closer to American military infrastructure. Quaglia offers a specific example, a video attributed to jihadists about to behead two Americans dressed in orange, filmed in a desert setting. Upon careful analysis of the lighting, he notes that the two victims are illuminated from opposite directions, light coming from both sides. Physically, this would imply either the presence of two suns or that the scene was shot in a studio using artificial lighting. He concludes that in some cases, fabrications are constructed so blatantly that they resemble a deliberate affront to the viewer, as if to say, let's see if you'll swallow this too. And, according to the commentators, the public almost always does. The discussion concludes with an overall assessment of the film's historical and political significance. Wag the Dog is, for both commentators, far more than a black comedy. It is a manifesto declaring that everything seen on television should be considered false until proven otherwise. It is a trailer, produced before the events it seemed to anticipate, of an era in which the production of mediated reality would become total. Quaglia summarizes the film's strategic significance in these terms. Its greatest value lies not in any single event it may have foreshadowed, but in the way it prefigured the entire narrative structure of the decades that followed. In 1997, the film's spin doctors were already capable of fabricating anything through special effects. By 2026, he observes, the technological capacity to produce news events, statements, images, and constructed realities has advanced to the point where viewers can no longer be certain that what they see on television or social media has actually happened. That's all for today. See you in the next episode of Hollywoodism, Movies and Propaganda, here on Compelling Topics.
I went to